Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive, the podcast that skips small talk and goes straight for the concepts that shape our thinking and behavior. In this podcast, cold expertise is defenestrated as warm philosophy is enthroned in an attempt to explore the field in which we're all scientists looking for answers, living well. Hello, world. Welcome to another episode of the Deep Dive with Eyal Shai. Today, my guest is Rachel Clifton. Hi, Rachel.
Hello!
Hello. And as the custom goes, I think we'll dive right into it. What is an idea that has helped you live well?
Ooh, hello. Great to be here. Love this question. Love going right in. I'm just gonna speak from the heart to what's alive for me at the moment. And an idea that's helped me to live well is this very simple sentence: stop making yourself wrong.
Okay, that's awesome. Great headline for this one. And yeah, I'll just have to let you start unpacking it in whatever way you find fitting. But maybe if we were to go back a little bit, like what is it like to make yourself wrong?
Ah, wow. What a question. What a question. And thank you for your direction and kind of taking the lead after my spontaneous share. What's it like to make yourself wrong? Well, I can't speak for everybody, but I know what it's like for me, or I know what it can be like for me, rather, because I'm open to many different possibilities. Ah, what comes up? Hmm. I want to take a moment before I answer to actually just get into my body and let myself feel it. Because I feel like that will yield the most authentic response. It feels painful. It feels kind of gut wrenching. Like I feel it in my stomach. And it feels like this crampy, nagging pain. It's it hurts. It physically hurts to make myself wrong. But the implication here, what's really underlying this is the idea of being wrong, which is
Right.
closely connected with shame.
Hmm. Yeah, that's fascinating. Like why do you think people even go down that path of making themselves wrong? And also, when you say wrong, you mean like not fitting, not good enough to in some way or something like that.
Let me start with your second question about what I mean. When I say wrong, I actually mean it in when I say a purer sense. That's not to discredit the whole not being enough thing, but I want to go one level deeper, to the core of what I feel this is about, which is ultimately practicing non-resistance and not rejecting, denying, or suppressing or repressing even any aspect of your human experience and indeed the human experience. And yeah, not making myself wrong, because I want to speak from a place of I and lived experience, just simply means being able to be okay with whatever is, which doesn't necessarily always mean being happy clappy or feeling like I've done the right thing or being proud of myself. It just simply means being able to stand in an okayness and in an acknowledgement that actually we are not defined. This might be a controversial statement, by the way, but we are not defined by our actions. There's something broader, there's something deeper. And actually, I think that's really, really important to hold on to because otherwise, it's so easy to judge ourselves and to judge others and to stay connected and invested in stories that may or may not serve us. And
Yeah.
yeah,
What do you think takes us to this place of starting to deny, starting to maybe diverge from the path that is our authentic self, and kind of go into this place where you just become something that you're not, or you start layering these stories upon yourself? What is it? Is it self-preservation or something else that happens to us? Because almost everyone engages in it, right?
agreed. Agreed. I I love the phrase yes and. I think it's probably all of the things that you've mentioned around self-preservation, um, and it's something that all of us engage in uh, at some point or another, to a lesser extent or a larger one. But I actually think that there's something else that's really, really important and fundamental here around role models and around the uh, responses that we receive from our environment and how they shape us, particularly early on in our lives.
Right. So you're talking about culture, family members, parents,
Hmm.
peers. Um, yeah, that's really interesting because there's always that friction between wanting to do well in life, and then you probably realize at some point, if you're the type of person who's had that awakening, that hey, actually doing well is never outside of context, right? I live in this society that then constantly gives me feedback about whether I'm doing well or not, and oh, it turns out that so far, whenever I felt like I was doing well, I was just receiving this feedback from society or family or anything like that. And then you might get in touch with your inner self and it's like, oh, I haven't been doing well at all. So, do you see it necessary to kind of break out of this mini matrix thing? Like it's maybe not changing the whole of reality, but just your reference point for how well you're doing, taking it from an external source into something more internal.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what growing up is, in essence, going beyond your earliest influences and who you feel you should or need to be based on what you've learned from well-meaning people around you who may or may not know what's right for you because ultimately only you know what's right for you, because it's your life, not anybody else's. At least that's my personal belief. And crucially, having the courage to explore. And this, interestingly enough, for me at least, takes me full circle to what not making myself, yourself, ourselves wrong is really about, which is giving ourselves the permission and freedom to grow and change and even make mistakes without being defined by them.
Yeah, that's really good, and I'm immediately thinking of ways of actually doing it. Like, um, why is it so rare that people actually do it? Yeah, actually go for it and try to explore and play with new ideas, new ways of being. Why is it so rare? And what do you think? we could do to get there.
Are you open to being gently challenged on that?
Yeah.
I'm curious. Well, thank you first of all. I love it when people are willing to play with me in new ways. I'm curious about your point on it being so rare.
Hmm.
Um, Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I just the way I view it, I live at least in a place where people around me, um, most of them are just, it seems, are following a pattern that's widespread, that's the mainstream, and in order to go through that pattern and live it out, there needs to be a lot of kind of complaining and, saying stuff like this is how life is. Okay, all this stuff that really kind of is just there to ease, I think, the frustration of never really having uh, gotten to what it is that they wanted to do with their lives. So I see that as a very common thing around me where people don't take, and a lot of times it's just like this very narrow-sighted kind of behavior or looking at the very short term thing, because I think a lot of people, if they had given themselves 2 3 years to just play around, this is what it takes to kind of go down your own path. And because the path is so well charted by our society, people just can't take this free time for themselves to work on their own stuff and come up with their own new ideas and interesting ideas about how to live, that it's just easy to get into the river that's already the mainstream, that's just going to take you away for decades of your life. So I think this is why I say this is how I feel about at least my immediate environment. Less so much when I go on Twitter, when I go online, I see a lot of incredible people. But if I look in real life, as they call it, then most people, yeah, most people are just funneled down the same path.
What helps you?
To me, I don't know. I was just born a rebel and a maverick, and it starts very early with me. I would just be
Preach.
have a strong sense of justice and a strong sense that I wanted to challenge myself, challenge society. Never was the kind of person to take orders. Never was the kind of person to give them either. And though at some points in my life I did try to kind of come closer to the mainstream, and every time it was just, okay, I'm hitting a wall here and I can't do it to myself, so here I am breaking away again.
This is very relatable.
Yeah, how about you?
Honestly, pretty similar, although I tried really hard. I tried really, really, really hard. I tried really hard to repress myself for a long time to fit into my sense of what other people wanted or needed me to be in many different incarnations. Um, and ultimately, I feel that what I'm unlearning and have been unlearning steadily for the last few years is self betrayal, is putting other people's opinions and approval above my own, and ultimately what it's like to have integrity and to really have the courage to A, stand for something, and B, walk yourself through hard things, and C, not make yourself right or wrong, or anybody else right or wrong for that matter, for any of it. And that, in and of itself, I feel, could easily be, you know, a life journey. And I think it is a life journey, being honest. But all we
Yeah,
have is now.
That's a, yeah, a strong agreement there. I think that people don't really appreciate the fact that really each person for themselves has have so much more information about the world that they live in, that it's absolutely um, preposterous always to expect someone to give you good advice. They can maybe direct you a little bit. They can
Mm,
help. Like, experience definitely has its benefits, but experience without sound thinking and sound analysis from the first person perspective is just not going to do it, right? I mean, I think we rarely appreciate the fact that we don't have the same bodies as other people. We don't have the same pattern of thinking. We don't have the same interests. And it's just something that is people so happily universalize and just say, oh, this worked for me. It must work for you. People don't appreciate the role of chance and luck in what's going on. And you're so right when you're putting the finger on the fact that we're not empowered to really make choices for ourselves, especially not in the education system and the culture that we live in. And that's a thing that is sorely missed, I think. Um, yeah, and for me, like I mentioned this on the podcast before, but I was inspired by the story of Dennis Rodman. Do you know him?
no,
No,
tell
says
me.
nothing to you. Yeah, well, clearly not an NBA fan in the 1990s. Oh well.
Sorry.
Um, but he was just he was just this amazing basketball player, but was completely depressed, almost killed himself, and he was just looked very unassuming, was very shy, and then after his near suicide attempt, just decided that he will be this flashy, almost like sometimes he would just show up as a drag queen. He dated Madonna for a while, so he just took on this very flashy lifestyle where he's completely out there, like with bling bling and glitter and everything, and at least to the outside, I know he's had his trouble and stuff, but at least it seems like this made things better for him because he stopped fucking caring about what um, people might view him as. Now he was this freak, and he was a much happier freak than before. Before he was a freak who didn't let his freakiness show.
This reminds me of uh you're gonna laugh at me, but an Instagram post that I shared a while back, which was called "Let Your Freak Fly," which is exactly kind of the same thing and the same principle, or at least that's kind of how I'm hearing it around just having the courage to be. And whatever that is and looks like, it's okay. Stop making yourself wrong. What other people think is their business. It's not your job to try to control them. They have the right to think and feel what they do. And let yourself be happy.
Yeah, and like earlier, I said that it's just in my genes or whatever to be this kind of trailblazer for myself. But it's now recollecting my teenage years that wasn't true at all. Like I was totally crushed under the weight of a society telling me that having your GED is like super important, which it isn't, kids. By the way, it's not. You can always do it later. But and I just yeah, basically took me to a very bad place of not really knowing that I had the potential to do stuff that I like, but there was literally no encouragement or positive feedback about even attempting it, seeing where it could lead me. And I wonder, like with your journey, what
Mm,
were some of the things that you maybe felt were a calling for you or anything like that that you actually
yeah.
had to suppress?
Oh my God, what a question. What a question. I mean, I have so many questions for you as well. Like what a rich little anecdote to share and then drop a question for me and make me feel awkward that I need to
Well,
respond to your questions. You're not
yes.
making me feel anything because I'm choosing to take that on. all this stuff
Right?
about
My
power.
techniques are very nefarious, but yeah, it'll come back right at me. It's a
Yeah,
problem.
I see you. I see you. No, it's all good. It's all good. Around repression, number one thing that comes to me is sexuality. Super simple, and super powerful. Um, and yeah, let me unpick that a little bit, or unpack it rather. Um, Female sexuality is pretty powerful. I think most people would agree,
Yes.
in terms of the impact that it has on the world, or the impact that it has on men specifically, um, or and if we go to like archetypes, femininity as a force of nature that creates chaos and is disruptive and ruins people's lives and drives people crazy and all of this slight bullshit.
It's like
Most
as you say it, I'm like saying it's so obviously a projection by men on it. It's like,
it's
right,
like, mate, can you not like control or take responsibility for yourself so much that you have to put this on this poor
exactly.
innocent a little attractive person with tits or bum? Like, wow.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's the conditioning that I grew up with. That not just me, honestly, I think most of us grew up with. Um, and look, I mean, I was really fortunate in many ways because unlike many people of my generation, so I hear, I had sexual experiences early on that were really positive and meaningful, you know, with a partner who loved me and who I loved. And, you know, it was ethical and consensual and playful and exploratory, and that's what you would want. It wasn't kind of a drunken hook up at a party via a dating app.
Right.
And yet, I've definitely found in recent years again that my biggest journey, my biggest reclamation has been of my ability to claim my sexuality as my own and to get out of needing to be performative and of actually using and abusing my sexuality and my femininity as a way of trying to get people to love me.
Hmm.
And I say this not just because my work is really around attachment and trauma and helping people to move beyond uh, old ways of living and being to create lives that they're really deeply in love with, and partnerships that come with that, invariably, partnerships of any kind, and relationships of any kind. But because I live my work, and I live my work first and foremost. And this is kind of what I was mentioning to you yesterday when you asked me how I was,
Yes.
and I was like, yeah, wow. I mean, there are things that we can only learn with others. You know, we can't learn them in books or from watching YouTube videos. And we certainly can't learn them through solo meditation retreats. I
Right.
spent all of my time when I was younger alone, doing lots of deep, meaningful work on myself in that way. And that was deeply powerful. I'm very grateful for that. I think it's very important to have a solid grounding in yourself, and to cultivate space away from external influences to work out what the hell that means, and also to revisit that periodically. But I don't think that we should negate the value and the healing potential and the joy of interpersonal relationships, because that's really what life is for, in my humble opinion.
Oh, yeah, I absolutely love it. There is nothing sadder than an armchair expert on living well because it's like, you know, you actually have to live to do that. Yeah, absolutely. And, more and more with time, I recognize that for me, I want to exist in the relationships. Like, I want to have good relationships for the relationship's sake. Even, yes, it makes my life amazing. absolutely amazing and rich and full, but it all comes as a just an after effect of just really working on the relationships and making the existence of the two or more people that are in the relationship really happen there in the space between us and other people, and less so much within ourselves or in the service of other people, you know? So I really like how you're putting it in words and kind of pointing at it. Um, yeah, well, what do you want to ask me a question now? I have to ask that, or do you want me to delve a bit deeper into into some of the things you said? Because I would have more questions, but I want to be fair.
Thank you for being fair with me. I appreciate it. I do have a question for you, and it goes back to what you shared earlier about your own journey and reconciliation. Were you born a rebel, or did your rebellion go through different incarnations as you grew and changed? And I'm curious, if you could go back in time and have a little chat with your teenage self, pick an age, any age, what would you say? I'm not going to ask you to give them advice because I don't know about you, but when I was a teenager, I didn't take anybody's advice. I wouldn't have been able to, even if I tried.
Right.
So, on that basis, older Rachel knows don't try and give little Rachel advice. Little Rachel will not be very impressed and will respect you less.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, me neither. I would probably not be listening to myself. But, you know, first of all, I have to say, really revisit my assertion that I was always a rebel. But it's not that I'm a rebel at heart. I'm a person who wants to do different things. And because these different things are not encouraged, then I have to be a rebel to protect myself, right? It's not that I'm all about enjoying the rebellion itself. No, that's quite stressful. I like having good vibes with people. I enjoy peace, and I enjoy yeah, mutual understanding. But if these things are not present, then I have to protect myself, and I have to protect um, my wishes and my dreams. And I think that from a young age, I wanted to get to a point where I do something that's meaningful to me and for others as well, in the sense that I wanted to create things. And it was never clear to me what my talent was. Some people, like my wife, here you can see behind me this crazy bird that she's painting right now. And it's very interesting that, you know, she obviously has this talent. Some people have this obvious talent. For me, there wasn't, but I read a lot of books, so I thought it might be writing or something. But I was never given the green light to go ahead with any of that. So I think that created a lot of the tension. I always felt this sort of very vague to do something. So that was it for me. And you know, the only it's really, I'm speaking as if I've been doing this for many years now. I've been doing what I want. No, this is something that started with COVID hitting and me being without a job and just gambling on myself, just getting to that point in life when I'm like, you know, I really do feel crazy, and I really felt crazy. Sometimes I still do, because if you go against the grain there, and you go against expectations, you're made to feel crazy. People are like, how are you going to spend your days doing a podcast or doing that? It's like, is there any money in it? When are you going to make a living? In essence, all these things, like, why aren't you normal? Why aren't you like us, just doing this thing that we don't really like doing and then complaining to let some steam off? So that's for me, and it's just in the past 2 years or so that I actually feel like I'm flourishing, in a sense, in that sense. Like, I had a good life before, but now it's even better. Um, yeah, did I answer the question or did I digress?
You didn't answer at all,
Okay.
but it was a great digression.
No, so put me back on track. I love to
Yeah.
let go. I love it that you're interviewing me. I love it.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing. I like to give as good as I get, and I like conversations.
Oh, what I would tell. Oh, what I would tell
Yes.
myself. Right.
Pick an age though. Let's ground
Right.
it. So pick an
I
age.
would just be telling myself. I would be just the one voice who's telling myself, "Look, I believe in you. You clearly you can do a lot of these things, and you're not going to be great. You're not going to be a master immediately, but it's okay. You have like your teenage years instead of spending them crushed under expectations and just this uh, like regimen of studying, going to school, and all that stupid shit. Then it's, you could be a great artist if you start now. You could figure out your thing, your medium, your voice, and you can run with it. And I actually think that I would have reacted to something like that even as a teenager. I would have clung on to this person who told me that, and um, we would have made a small team of people who believe in me.
Because it's not advice. It's somebody seeing your potential and seeing
Right.
your that little spark within you and saying, I see you, I love you. Come on, let's cultivate it. Like hold on and let's make something. Which is so different to you should be doing this, or in my day I did this, or I think you should do this because like
Yeah,
yes.
absolutely, absolutely. And today I'm doing this. I'm doing a couple other creative things, and it just feels right. It has no obvious purpose. Like, and it just feels good in itself without thinking long term about why or how is this going to benefit me or monetarily or anything like that. It just feels right. So I'm wondering, in your case, like you mentioned something that's not. I don't want to say it's not art. Maybe people could argue that it is art, like sexuality in some sense. But
Uh-huh.
for you, like, how is it actually expressed? Like the freedom that you give yourself to be more authentic. Like if it's not anymore abusing yourself or using yourself to get things or to get love, as you said, then what does it look like post that conception?
So, funnily enough, back to your point about feeling good and purpose, that's exactly what it's like for me. I think our purpose in life is to feel good and experience joy. I really, really, really do. And for me, sexuality is about pleasure. And I think that women in particular, I speak as a woman. I don't know if all women will agree with me. I don't pretend to speak for all women. I suspect that some will, and that's enough. I suspect that some people will, and that's enough, irrespective of gender. But I feel that we are often disconnected from our own pleasure, and that gets in the way of not only experiencing real joy in our lives, but real intimacy with other people, particularly intimacy in a physical sense with partners, in a romantic and sexual realm. And if you're used to your sexuality being a commodity and being something that defines your worth rather than something that's for you first and foremost, something that you can enjoy for you again first and foremost, it's going to feel very different. It's going to feel very constricted. And when I was younger, I was completely disconnected from my body. I had no real idea how I was feeling much of the time. I I didn't even realize what I was doing because I was on autopilot and it was all I knew. And I think we often need to experience contrast, to experience that another experience is possible, to be able to believe or hope or dream, whatever you whatever you start with, that something different might be possible for us. And I think of this particularly in relation to my own relationships and how they have changed as I do and as I have done. Like until about 3 years ago, I wasn't really able to be friends with men. Not because, to be clear, I would always have sexual relationships with them, but because I just didn't feel comfortable. I just didn't feel safe. And it has been one of the biggest joys of the last few years to experience that differently. I mean, now I have amazing male friends. I love my male friends. They are epic, and it's beautiful to be able to do relationships cleanly in such a way that, look, even if there is some kind of attraction at some point on either side, that's safe. That doesn't have to be acted upon. It doesn't have to be the focus or all encompassing for either party. And it doesn't have to be something that feels threatening. And so, again, the biggest learning that kind of comes into all of this for me is learning experientially how not to be afraid of men. Because that's, again, kind of what I knew subconsciously from a very early age because of the attention that I got and the experiences that I had. And again, I don't think I'm unique in this by any means. I think this is a pretty common experience for many, many, many people. And it inhibits us. It inhibits our expression. It inhibits our freedom. And so my biggest work has been learning to feel safe in myself so that I can conduct myself in a way that helps me to feel safe no matter what. And so I can ensure that I can be free and I can be open and expressive and loving and expansive without becoming self-sacrificial. And every relationship that you have, regardless of whether it's platonic or not, can benefit from that, in my experience.
Yeah, yeah, that's well said, So I think it's only fitting that I kind of speak from the perspective of a man again, not everyone, as you say, but you know, um, for me, it was definitely the case that having been so busy with the person I should be according to society, right? Like going out there, conquering, um, basically, yeah, looting people. I don't know,
Oh dear.
um,
Oh dear.
right?
Very
And
human.
just uh, yeah, and it was depressing in real time. But when you are burdened with all these expectations, and when you are expected to talk about certain things, when you are in a group of men, then supposedly there comes an age where the subject is going to be sex and like, hey, let's hear about your accomplishments of late, your latest crusade into the
Oh God.
whatever. Um, it's like war stories, right? But and it was very burdensome, and I wish I could say that. So again, I told you I was a rebel, but I wasn't always a good rebel, and there were times where I just played that game and was out there to kind of fulfill the the prophecy or the story of who I should be, And I remember clearly, like at some point, I was telling someone I was with, I was just like, I'm just sick of it. Now everything I can think about when I think about sex is like violence. And I'm tired of being in this mode of just like being out there and always trying to like, calculating how to get into this fort that's out there. Oh, there's a wall here, so I need to throw a ladder up there and then go through the go over the ramparts into the thing until I get to the dungeon or whatever. And it's just like this calculated, and you're losing exactly what you're saying of actually being in touch in yourself, and even more so with the other person, because the other person is now an object, right? And this can
Mm,
be from the perspective of maybe a woman, it can be just like generic scary thing, or from the
mm,
perspective of a man, it can be just like this generic thing that needs to be exploited in some sense. And I don't
mm.
think it's coincidental that it's this worldview about women that they should be using their sexuality to get love, or to get really a lot of different things. It's not a coincidence that you can say about someone, oh, she's easy, or that she's giving, right? It's like
Mm.
something that the woman is giving and the man takes, or if the woman is not giving, you can con her into maybe giving, or and it's so ugly and so disgusting, so I can
Yes.
genuinely say in my life that I avoided going as far as some people go on that, but I really think you can ruin your life, even as a man. And this may be controversial, because I'm not saying here that women who have, I do think that in war and in this type of relationship, like there's obviously like a victim side that suffers more, but even the perpetrator of the crime, or of the injustice, is going to sentence themselves to a life of regretting that. And I'm not sure. Then some people go over a line where no matter how much atonement they attempt, I don't think they're going to um, fully reclaim. But maybe you have different thoughts, because you're talking about reclaiming, and I'm super interested in also hearing about the healing part, and how to pick the pieces and start
Mm.
putting something together.
Wow. Well, I mean, I love hearing your experience, first of all. Thank you so much for sharing with me and with the listeners, if this part
Yeah,
gets into the podcast.
it will.
It takes guts to be honest about these things and admit your own, my own, our own culpability, and how we create and perpetuate things that we actually don't want in our lives. It's that I think actually is the key to healing. But it's not easy, and it's not pleasant, at least not in the short term. And I think it would be
No,
wrong, profoundly wrong, to suggest otherwise.
I just had to relive it as I was telling it to you, right? That can't be pleasant.
Yeah, I hear that. I want to go back to the language that you used around war and, uh, you know, trying to get something from somebody and giving and taking, and then share a little bit about the double standards of sexuality that I feel I personally am, working to change the paradigm around, which is this very traditional slut versus stud double standard, whereby a woman, if she sleeps with a lot of people, is a slut, and that's a bad thing. But if she doesn't sleep with people, then she's frigid, and that's a bad thing. And meanwhile, a guy talks about his conquest with his group of friends, and it's a competition, and the manliest one has the most or does the most outrageous things. And to your point, it's very objectifying. And the pleasure for both parties,
Diminished.
conveniently or not so conveniently as the case may actually be, seems to get lost.
Yeah.
But the end result is the same. Men and women, and I know I'm speaking in very binary terms here. I think it's much broader than that, but I'll use that for convenience for now. Men and women both end up not enjoying and feeling good about sex,
True.
which is a tragedy
It
because
is.
sex is great, or can be great, and should be great. And well, it's the life, it's how we came to be. Demonizing sex is demonizing yourself at some level. It's demonizing a core aspect of most people's identities. And again, I want to be clear, not every, there are people who don't experience sexual desire and drive, and that's totally cool and totally awesome. I'm speaking to and about people who do. And if you feel that way, but you don't feel safe to be able to express that, at least in my experience, can end up either leaking into other areas or just not feeling very good, and just meaning that you kind of feel a bit stuck and a bit blocked and a bit like, oh, I can't be who I want to be, and I'm kind of treading water and just doing my thing, and things might look a certain way but they don't feel it. And
Mm-hmm.
back to what you were sharing earlier, I mean, if we focus on feeling good, like actually feeling good, not just I'm not talking about short-term hedonistic pleasure. I'm talking about actually in the purest way possible, like what can we do to prioritize aliveness and joy, which is very, very different to kind of like short-term gratification.
Right.
When we do that, it's transformative. We see the world with new eyes and we experience it differently too. And there's so much possibility and opportunity that comes from that place.
Yeah, absolutely. What was a turning point for you when you realized it's like, okay, this is it. I can't be. Obviously, it's something that's running through our heads for a while, and then there's a point where you need to get up and go and do it. Like, what was a catalyst for you to make a real change for yourself?
Okay, two things spring to mind. I ended things with my last long-term partner because we were sexually incompatible. And I'd known that from the beginning, but I'd kind of chosen to let that slide or not listen to myself with it because everything else was really good. But I had known, I'd felt it. So that. Um, he is and was a wonderful person. No complaints, inverted commas. I learned a hell of a lot. My best friend, just great. But it wouldn't have been fair to continue the relationship. And it became abundantly clear that things needed to change, sadly. But, also not sadly, like just being truthful and having integrity and being respectful to
Improvement is
us
not
both.
sad. So,
Yeah. Um, and number two was an experience that happened for me shortly after, which was when I was. What language do I use today? Is it rape? Is it sexual assault? How do I want to frame it? I'll say sexually assaulted today, just because it's easier, honestly. It feels less jarring. The word rape is actually quite, I don't know, I feel it. It feels very violent to even say. And
I
sometimes I want to
absolutely.
go there. Sometimes, you know what? I'd rather just whatever. Like that's not the focus right now. But when I was sexually assaulted, by somebody that I met on a Bumble first date, and again, I had to kind of come face to face with how I had ignored my own intuition and my own responsibility. And then what did I need to change in how I was showing up in my relationships to create the kinds of experiences and relationships, of course, that I wanted. So those two things, and that was 3 and a bit years ago. And since then, I really embarked on very deep, very immersive, and very cohesive journey of discovering that and going beyond who and what I thought I could be. And I think that the difference here uh, has been that rather than doing it by myself and staying isolated, which was always my pattern previously, having done a lot of healing work in my teens. I mean, I didn't do that alone. I did that with a lot of therapists and all of that. But in terms of the presence of a community, that was very limited. But this time, I took and have taken and am taking a very different approach in my life and in my work, and that feels that feels really, really, really good. That feels like the right foundation for everything else. Back to focusing on and prioritizing feeling good.
Yeah, well, yeah, thanks of all. First of all, thanks for sharing. And it is like, I can't even repeat the word you said. I mean, rape for me, yeah, it sounds so, so violent, and it is. And for another time, like, it would be really interesting to think about why. But, interestingly, in Latin, it literally means a taking. So taking without asking. Um, I really salute your bravery, just opening up about it first of all, and the tangent that it kind of made me go on in my mind is that of how it turns out that a lot of people go on to make positive changes in their lives when they reach a low point, because of, and something to the effect of what you said about not trusting intuition, and ending up in a really bad place is something that almost in this way came up in my conversation with Brooke on this podcast. And it's very interesting because then there's this question where it's like, oh, could you just be learning these things when you reach a low point? And I think, and then I think to myself, no, it's like this is what happens if you are brought up with the wrong ideas. Then the only thing that can get you out of it onto a better path is if it shatters. And to shatter it, you need something really bad to happen. But this starts with the right education. If we would be getting that when we are young, we would just be growing naturally into having the right ideas about things, right? So to me, it immediately, like, as a father to a girl,
Mm-hmm.
and hearing that, like, once you become a parent, then you suddenly hear about stuff happening to other people, and you're like, oh my God, I'm immediately freaking out because this could be my girl growing up. So then it gives me the inspiration and the drive to really raise her and encourage her to have good ideas about reality and about the world, so that she wouldn't have to hit rock bottom.
Mm.
And I
Mm.
love the also the idea that you didn't completely diminish your agency in
Mm.
going into a situation, because I think too easy extreme to go to is one thing is to say, oh, it's all the men, and this is it's all on the man who's going in there. It's all on the, and it's true in a sense. Or there's victim blaming that's putting all the blame on, that's kind of adjacent to what you were mentioning before, but just
Mm.
why are you dressing up like that? This is
Mm.
goes back to like the slut bias there.
Mm.
Um, and I just really appreciate the fact that you can separate the other person's agency, which is obviously was they felt that they had this agency and they just ran with it, but also keep a place where you look at yourself and see, um, what did I do? In what ways did I not listen to myself to avoid this? And I think that's super important. And in the end, that's what we want. We want a world full of people who are feeling agency, who are empowered to really follow their heart and mind, so that we don't all end up in these places. And just to finish this thought, it's like I feel like it's almost taboo to represent the somebody perpetrating a crime as a tragedy in its own right. And I keep finding myself not wanting to say it, but the more I talk about, the more years I think about it, it is also a tragedy. So
It,
I don't know. It's just a thought I'm putting out there since we're about breaking walls down.
so much to say. Thank you so much. What a beautiful, rich reflection. I don't want to say too much about what happened because I don't want to, I don't want that person's identity. But uh, interestingly, I spent a lot of time unpicking it in the months afterwards. And I wrote about it. I can send you the article as well. Maybe we can include that as part of the podcast notes.
Yeah.
It's on Medium. It's called The Things We Don't Talk About, Opening Pandora's Box, Journaling in the Aftermath of Sexual Assault. And I delve deep into a lot of these issues um, because sex in this kind of context is not really sex. It's about power. It's about an assertion of or a grabbing for power, in my opinion. And why would people do that? Why would people feel the need to do that in such a brutal way, to take from others? Why would you only take when somebody wouldn't freely give, or when you don't feel able to ask
Right.
because you're scared.
Otherwise, you receive.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
you just receive. Otherwise, again, it's back to this: women don't want to have sex. Actually, women do want to have sex. Women want to feel safe. You know, that's not unreasonable. But women want to have sex just as much as men want to have sex. What happens when men don't want to have sex? That's another interesting question. But we can discuss that another time. Um, yeah, sorry, where was I going with that? Yeah, power. People don't take. People don't feel the need to take if they actually feel powerful. And when I say actually feel powerful, I mean if they feel secure in themselves and in their quote unquote power. And the person who did that knew what he was doing. And I know for a fact, even from the conversations that we had over the course of that evening, that he was deeply insecure. And what I had to unpick in the aftermath and have unpicked and continue to in, you know, just in how I conduct myself in relationships is what drew me to somebody who was deeply insecure. Why was I attracted enough in whatever way to somebody like that that I didn't voice my boundaries enough, leave, choose not to go on the date in the first place, choose, you know, just there are a myriad different things that I could have done at different points that I did not do for whatever reason. It's because I was insecure. I was insecure too. I was more insecure than I am now. And I was also less in touch with myself than I am now. So the number one thing that I would like to see cultivated in society and that I work to support people in and with is cultivating connection with themselves. Because I really do believe that we all have the quote unquote answers within us already. Sometimes we just need to learn how to access them. And having a guide and support along the way is super, super powerful, particularly if and when we've grown up in a world that teaches us, subconsciously or otherwise, to reject, deny, suppress, and repress ourselves. Which takes me full
Yeah.
circle to the original idea,
Mm-hmm.
is around stop making yourself wrong. And my big breakthrough in my own healing and awakening and reclamation has been learning how not to make myself wrong and viewing every experience that I've had, every experience that I continue to have, present tense, in all ways as an initiation for me to get even better, to grow even more, to become even more of a person that I'm supposed to be. That's it.
That's that's amazing. First of all, you're a natural podcast host, and I'm looking forward to learning what it's going to be like. Because bringing it back to the topic is usually my job, and you just did it. Um, and
I
an
wasn't even
idea,
taking notes.
yeah, and an idea that came to my mind is also, to add to that list of things you shouldn't do to yourself is, I think that it's so easy to adopt a script. So many of us adopt a script, and it can be a religious script of how to live your life. It can be just the code of law. It can be just the cultural script of who you should be, what you should be doing, and so on, things we discussed. And I think a lesson should be like, all these tragedies, I think, eventually transpire when people continually override their own true self, who's just, you have this intuition about what is right for you. And I think that's true for victims. I think that's true for perpetrators, as long as they're not like true psychopaths who can't be empathic at all. But most people are not, and they're still um, committing injustices just because they want to stick to some script so bad that they're overriding their own instinct that tells them this is what I'm doing is wrong. So it's I think on both sides, and I think that is exactly the stop making yourself wrong. If you feel like there is effort that needs to be put in to persevere with something that did not originate with you, originated with society, with a parent, with a friend, just don't do that. It's okay, you can read those scripts, you can see, you can judge them for what they are. Don't force yourself to follow them, to become a
Mm.
person that is not that did not originate with you, as the moments are passing, right, in real time.
Mm.
Like, I'm just imagining that, and I don't want to hypothesize too much, to like make assumptions, but let's leave your specific case alone. But a lot of cases are probably of people coming to a date, coming to a place, and they're like, they already have a script in the end, like, I will kill myself if I don't get laid today. Like, this is the perfect opportunity and stuff. And I think that at any point, if that is going off script, I think there could be an overriding that just kind of throws them off, where it's like, okay, there's no consulting emotions or the other person, and just like striving to fulfill that script. That's probably a lot of
Mm.
what is happening in a lot of situations.
Mm. I'm curious, where do you get that idea from?
I just get it. I'm talking with you and I'm getting it. It's related to my thoughts about justice, though. The
No,
idea
I
of,
meant in relation to, I should have been clearer. I meant in
mm,
relation to this idea of people coming to dates with this sense of, uh, I must get laid or I would kill myself. Where does that idea originate from?
oh, um, I think it's just kind of what fulfilling a script feels like, right? It can be in very different areas. Like, I could say the same about people going to university studying something which they don't want to study, but their parents are like, you better not go back home if you don't finish this degree, right? And then just going. So I just imagine, um, although it, yeah. So I just imagine like people really thinking their life is in danger if they don't get that thing. Like, how am I going to show my face if I'm not achieving this, right? And then this thought just making them go crazy and completely
Mm.
disconnect from themselves, other, and commit the injustice they are going to commit. And the injustice is, in many cases, doesn't have a victim who's going to be traumatized. Very often, the people who spend 10 years doing something they don't want. They're committing an injustice unto themselves.
Mm. Is that your experience based on the conversations that you've had with other men about sex and their views of women?
No, thankfully, like I've always had strong. I always cared a lot about doing the right thing in the end and not letting myself um, act brutish. Um, so I was actually always quite vocal with even guy friends that if they're talking like that, they're saying like quite disgusting things to me. No, but I think it's just like the result of the 1+1 of just adding things up and seeing what
Mm.
the
Mm.
what the thought process might be like
Mm.
that drive people to override their own emotions, their own instincts, and that is very likely to
Mm.
end in tragedy.
Mm. So when I hear that, for me, it comes down to this overall disconnection, but a disconnection in relation to the fact that many people aren't taught how to have healthy relationships,
True.
either
Yeah.
with the opposite sex or just in general with anybody that they are attracted to, and even have healthy relationships, full stop. Like, what does that even mean and look like? And if you don't see that modeled around you, it can be really challenging to navigate, and you'll naturally follow the influences that you see, whether that's the media, TV shows, YouTube, porn, etc., in the absence of other things. And that makes a lot of sense. It's very, very easy to point fingers and demonize and discredit. But I think what we really need to work on, and what's a lot more constructive, is replacing that with
Yes.
something that's actually more more useful, and understanding the role and also the value that it has, insofar as it's it has a place. It informs many people's education in their lives. It's pretty formative. That's significant. What education would and could be better? I'm curious to hear from you about, your what you'd like to teach your daughter. And yeah, I'll leave it there. What would you like to teach your daughter about men?
Yeah, first of all, 100% agreement with you there. It's very easy to say what not, and I think very a good source on that is Gavin de Baker, who talks about violence and how to avoid violence. He's been on several podcasts, and he's a fascinating professional. Yeah, but in terms of what to actually teach, yeah, that is the point. I think that is the good education that's going to help people avoid these kind of challenges that, if you're a person who's lucky like yourself, like you're lucky in the sense that you got up, you got better, you got wiser. Some
100%.
people are devastated to the point of no return,
Mm,
so we don't want to test people in that
mm,
way. And what I said before is that, yeah, absolutely, that comes with correct education. And I think, yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, first of all, I think that with my daughter, it's going to be really playing it by ear. I mean, that's how I do my life anyway. But coming up with strategies is nice, but then in real time, they're going to be the actual happenings, then the actual discussions that rise from things that happen in one's life. I
mm,
don't think it's necessarily effective to start bombarding people with all the facts about how life can be terrible, right? And prepare them for every terrible situation. So rather, we need to abstract something from all that and then talk about exactly the thing that you're talking about how to actually have good discernment and good judgment in a moment without the list of things that we've already repeated several times: overriding, forcing, repressing, suppressing, and so on. So I think it's going to be very gradual rather than a series of 1 hour lectures, right? And she's still small, but definitely not neglected to the point where just letting her see what comes from the outside world, because we know what it is. I know what culture she's going to grow into. I know she's going to be offered to watch porn when she's like 8 or something, you know? I know all that stuff, and this, you can't let yourself just be at peace with that. So you need to give some pushback, but also not so much that you're actually making life seem so threatening that they're not worth living, right? So that you should cocoon in your own house or something. And that's a challenge, but I'll only know what I'm going to do, I think, when the moment comes. And it's going to be unpleasant in the same way that it's unpleasant for me to relive situations, in the same way that it's unpleasant for you, but it's necessary, right? So
Mm,
approaching things, not just letting the game unfold like based on how the dice are rolled,
mm,
and yeah, intervene in the right measure, which is hard.
mm. Yeah, I hear you. Saluting you. How did you learn how to communicate with women?
I have 3 older sisters. That's really good. I think that should be a law. Like once we can decide the sex of a baby, every man should be born into a family with 3 older sisters. That's pretty good. Um, but I still can't say that, I have the lived experience of a woman. But at first and foremost, I want to see, I want to feel like we're not too different to communicate, right? So I
Mm,
will see you as a person first and foremost, and then
mm,
biological sex comes second. Um, yeah, so it comes from, I think, values of equality, and really sticking with it, not just saying it in words. I think it stems from there, and then as time goes, I'm just trying to be more and more um, attentive, and also be imaginative enough to put myself in the shoes of women as far as I can. It's some things are very hard.
mm,
Um, yeah, and it all, I think, starts with a wish to be a beneficial person, a good friend, and so
mm.
on. So,
Yeah.
a challenge for you has been to feel secure. It's been a challenge for me to be inclusive, and make others feel secure with me. It's just something that's important
Mm,
for me.
mm,
Um, it's actually not that nice to feel like you're threatening someone, right? So I
mm.
don't want to be in
Agreed.
that position.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
And I've had that before, and it's a terrible feeling. I've
Mm,
definitely been around women, gotten the vibe that they look at me like a potential threat, or just a lot of times it would come across as like, I'm so not interested in you. I think that at this point I recognize that for some women it's like, okay, I'm going to feign disinterest for the sake of just keeping away from you, basically. And
mm,
that's also a tragedy. Like, for me, that's a missed connection
mm,
right there.
I
Yeah.
hear that. Yeah, I mean, the things we do to survive are often not the things that we do to thrive, whoever we are,
You
in
said
very
it.
simple terms.
You said it. Um, yeah, this has been fascinating, and I'm really grateful um, for you bringing this little discussed topic, and yeah, and for sharing and for letting me share. So this has definitely been healing. And before we say goodbye, I'd love to hear from you, where people can find your thoughts, your writings. I will link to the article you mentioned, But any other ways to reach you, that would be great. And also what you do.
Hello. Oh gosh, hello again. Oh wow. This has been such a joy. Thank you so much for inviting me on. I mean, I could talk about this stuff all day. And talking about this stuff is literally my job, which feels fitting because, I created a job that allows me to do what I love in service to myself and humanity. I mean, really, what could be better? And yeah, that's exactly the attitude that I take. People can find me on Twitter at Rachel Cliff. On LinkedIn, I'm pretty active there. Rachel Clifton. And what am I? What do I do? I'm an executive coach by training. I have a background in startups, and I'm also an embodiment teacher and relationship alchemist, which I'm so happy to have really got the opportunity to share a little bit with you today in relation to my own story and journey of experiential alchemy in my own right. Because, when I say I live my work, that's not a marketing tagline. That's something I would do, will do, independent of anything else. It's what I love. It's what I know. And there's so much more here. Like, this is just kind of the tip of the iceberg in relation to what I have been through and worked through to have become and be becoming who and what I am. So, in brief, what I do is I help people to heal their attachment wounds and generational trauma so they can live deeply meaningful, satisfying, rewarding lives that they're in love with. I personally settle for nothing less. I feel that I am in love with life. I'm falling in love with life more and more and more. And the more that I lean into that, the more amazing things happen to support that. And that is the energy that I live with and lead with. And if you come into my orbit, you are almost guaranteed, touch wood, if you're open to it, to feel the same. That's it.
Amazing, Rachel. And when I conceived of this podcast and created the format for it, now this is like the perfect embodiment of what I wanted to achieve. And first and foremost, make this a space for me to learn in and to heal in and to thrive in. And yeah, it's been just a wonderful conversation. So I'm looking forward to more.
Yes, more. Yes, I'm super down. There's so much more to chat about, and it's been a real joy. Thank you so much. I
All right,
appreciate
until
you.
next time.
Next time. Bye bye.